Hello and welcome to Imbokodo, a roundtable discussion with some of the most phenomenal women in South Africa. My name is Unathi Batyashe. Well, today's conversation essentially is to look at how far women have come in this country and how far the advancement of women is. I mean, we are going to be talking about various issues, to look at the challenges that still plague women in business today. How conducive or not is the environment for women to do business in the country? And of course, what are the critical steps needed to not only level the playing fields, but how to successfully grow the country's economy together? While there is notably improvements in terms of how far women have come, the numbers are still nowhere near where they ought to be. In South Africa, top management positions, for an example, in organizations are predominantly still occupied by men. According to the Business Women's Association, in fact, among the JSE-listed companies in 2017, women constituted 11.8% only of board chairpersons, which 1 in 6 JSE-listed companies having no women on the boards. The needle hasn't moved much. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you my lovely panel that is joining me today to discuss just some of these issues that are still plaguing the environment in which women are operating in. I'm going to start on my left-hand side and introduce to you Gabsi Mathenjwa. She is a business person who has led both in the public and the private sector. She's the founder of Portion 85 Centurion, Pty Limited, and Insika Foundation, NPC, specializing in project and program management in various sectors, including agriculture and tourism. I could go on and on. Welcome to you, Gabsi. And next to her is Hayley Eagle, is the director and owner of Jamsco Automotive Assemblies. She supports stamped and assembled car components for major manufacturers, both locally and internationally. She also supports the President's Women's Economic Forum, WICONA, for the automotive industry. And notably, in 2019, Hayley was nominated Africa's most influential woman in business and government. Welcome to you, Hayley. And next to Hayley is, I'm very happy to have young women on the table with us today, because I think it brings, rich conversation, particularly knowing what is happening with the women in this country. Dimpho Lushaba, she's an engineering entrepreneur, the director and operations manager of a young startup called Blue Carter Group. She has a master's degree in civil engineering, building construction from Portugal. Now, she spent the last 5 years improving the quality of life through infrastructure expansion in the African continent, all through her learnings abroad and, of course, her extensive education. Welcome to you, Dimpho. And next to me is Melang Manale. She is the Chief Operating Officer at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. She joined the JSE in January 2021 and brings with her a wealth of knowledge and experience, having worked in management, consulting, banking and financial services for more than 20 years. She was recognized as an IBM's Global Woman in AI, that's Artificial Intelligence honoree in 2020. Welcome to you, Itumeleng. And also, welcome to you, Ketiwe Sibanyoni, also one of our young panelists today. I'm very, very happy to have you here. She's a 22-year-old student activist and entrepreneur. She's a Bachelor of Commerce in Accounting graduate and currently pursuing her postgraduate studies. In 2018, she registered her events company, Inch Perfect Event Supplies and Services. And in 2020, she started the hashtag Helping GBV Survivors campaign. And welcome to you, Ketiwe. And welcome to all of you ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we are meeting today to discuss basically, how far we have come, as women in the country, particularly in the business space. And I'd like us to talk about gender equality first. And I'm going to start with you, Itumeleng. I know that in March, more than 100 of the global stock exchanges, you joined an annual Ring the Bell for Gender Equality, which is a fantastic initiative. But the JSE then went a little bit step further. You adopted a gender-neutral parental leave policy. Yeah. Firstly, before we talk about that policy, talk to me about what your thoughts are in terms of the importance of gender equality. And of course, as the JSE, what are you doing to advance that?
Of course, Unathi, gender equality is pivotal. And equality of all kinds, right? In any organization, simply because diversity brings better quality of outcomes. Studies have shown time and again that the companies with a more diverse board, a more diverse management layer, actually achieve better financial results than those that are kind of, all male, as an example. It's very important also that organizations reflect the client base that they're trying to serve. There's nothing worse than walking through the doors of whatever institution that you want to be a patron of as a client and not being able to relate to people across the table. That employee base has to first and foremost represent you for them to provide the services and offerings that are relevant to yourself. So whether it's gender or ethnicity or anything else, inclusivity really brings better outcomes from a financial perspective and a business sustainability perspective.
Thank you so much for that. Gapsi, I'd like to bring you into this conversation. Now, earlier I just threw out some stats in terms of just where women sit in those JSE listed companies in terms of boards, in terms of roles, even from an executive level position. You yourself sit on several boards. Talk to me about the importance of gender equality from your vantage point.
Well, thank you so much, Unathi. What is maybe very important is who are you servicing? Now, you're looking at our stakeholders, they're diverse. So if you're going to have a board that does not include diversity, then you're not taking care of yourself as an organization. So the way I look at it now is that we're far from where we're supposed to be, both in executive management and also in boards, in terms of women empowerment, in terms of maybe women inclusion in certain decisions that are key in running an organization. We have a journey that we still have to embark upon because our services are both about women and men. So it does make sense that then you need to increase the number of women that we have in those positions.
Hayley, I mean, I can't talk about gender equality without actually going into what it is that you actually do. Talk to us a little bit about what your job entails, because it sounds like you are right in the middle of a very male-orientated, environment. Talk to us about what you do and where women fit.
So what I do is I supply components, assembled components to the production line. So you have a chassis and we do safety critical components that we assemble and then send it to the chassis line. And that is in real time. You get 90 seconds to react. I've also, I got a press and supplied an OEM with a bracket that fits on the dash panel, 2 at a pitch. And that is what you call perfection. When you deal with the OEMs and such high quality, there's no room for compromising safety or quality. The risk to maintain the integrity of the parts is so important. And there's lots of room for women. And I think us as women take one step in that direction, we make way for our girl children and way for even our boy children from the previously disadvantaged, so that we can have meaningful transformation in the automotive sector. It's a brilliant sector, but there's a lot more that can be done for transformation.
Dimpo, civil engineering sector, how difficult was it for you to get into that environment?
It wasn't difficult at all. I mean, I had an older brother who was a town planner, and he said, look, I've got confidence that you can do this thing. Why don't you try it out, because you're very technical, and I used to love drawing when I was growing up. So with his guidance, I think that's how I built the passion within that industry.
Ketiwe, I mean, you are a young South African who started her own business. In fact, you also have an NGO running. How important is it for women, especially young women, to, venture out in as many environments as possible and not just go to the ones where, were ideally suited for just women?
I would say that it's really important to have your story and be intentional about it and your journey. So I found that when we assimilate to what we've been told to do as women, that's where the problem lies, where instead if I carve my own journey and I say I'll be intentional about embarking or breaking through into an industry where it's not really common for women to break into. I mean, oftentimes I'm always told that, are you sure you're going to make it? Surely your partner must be male, but that's not the case. So I have to be intentional about knowing that I can make it in entrepreneurship as a young woman, as a young Black woman.
All right, I'd like us to tackle, just some of the challenges that women are experiencing in this country at this moment, particularly given the economic environment. But let's do that after this very short break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with some of the most phenomenal women in the business sector. We're now going to talk about just some of the challenges and, in fact, successes in the business environments, especially because of the climate that we are currently in from an economic point of view. I'm going to start with you, Hayley. I mean, your business, the automotive suppliers like yourselves, you can add a lot of value to the local supply chain. Talk to me about just some of the challenges that you've encountered in this space. We've already established that it is a male-intense environment. Talk to us about some of the challenges and how you've overcome some of them.
So the automotive industry, even though for all their brilliance that they have, has not shown that brilliance and in transformation. And what happened 9 years ago is that government stepped in and said, we need to make sure that the OEMs do what they say they're going to do. And it started with an incubation program, and it was a brilliant program, challenging, exciting, and that is what helped to bring, well, we were 2 females in the 9 years, to bring females into the automotive industry. And now we need to see the oversight, policy being created, or the policies that's there to make sure that there's someone that looks into it and makes sure that there's oversight and that there's governance, most of all, in terms of automotive transformation. The automotive industry is obviously a very powerful industry, and we're very grateful for all the achievements and what they do to incorporate job creation and sustainability, but we do need to have very deliberate inclusion of women in the supply chain.
Melang, you're the COO of the JSC, and while we're talking about some of the challenges and just some of the opportunities that you can find within those challenges, COVID-19 happened, right, and affected so many businesses. Yeah. Talk to us about just some of the things that you've seen and how they impacted, particularly in those listed companies, because of COVID-19.
It might sound very simplistic, but the nuts and bolts of COVID-19 was a human problem. It was a human challenge, right? And it affected all spheres of industry, private and public similarly, because it was individuals literally with health challenges or suffering losses due to people actually in their lives succumbing to COVID. And so very quickly what we found is that the first thing that industry got together with were CEOs talking on a daily basis, how are you handling the crisis? How are you managing your people? How are you making sure that wellness is a priority in the context of something that is an overwhelming enemy? So even competitors at some point had to band together, and everybody had a common enemy, which was the pandemic. At the core of it, it was how do we now restructure ourselves very quickly to be resilient, to be able to work and run the economy from home, not being able to physically come to the offices, etc. And how do we make sure that normality in the sense of the economy can keep standing in the context where the people who are the engine room of the economy, I mean, humans do these jobs, it's not machines, right? How do we make sure that the wellness of those people gets us to the point of resilience and continuity? That was the biggest thing. So we really learned as a company, as a regulator of other listed companies, and just as a convener of very important conversations in the industry, that at the heart of it all, it was a people problem. It was a challenge of how do we deal with the vagaries of mental stability, gender-based violence as an example, because now people are in the same home, not being able to leave from their aggressor. and having to manage children's learning and serve clients at the same time. All of that were human challenges.
Absolutely. Staying with COVID-19, Ketiwe, you started your business just before the pandemic hit. And what we saw a lot of the time is that when people started businesses before the pandemic hit, they've had to pivot a lot of the time. So talk to me about how you navigated that time, especially because you were a young, woman in business.
For me, it was a very interesting time because obviously I created an events business, wanting to create memorable experiences for people. It's about celebrations, but then my business became more about doing decor for funerals. And that adjustment for me was actually in the mind, because now I'm tailoring to a whole different experience. I'm trying to cater and also feed comfort through my service to people that were not the target market. And so I've had that adjustment, but also it was about going from the big events that bring in the revenue to creating smaller experiences. And how do you sell that in a time where there's a pandemic? How are you selling an experience? Why is it worthwhile having celebration experience in a time that was so tough? So for me, it was more of something that I had to tap into emotional intelligence and see that how do I add the human touch to my business. So yeah.
No, fantastic. Dimpo, you work a lot on the field, as a civil engineer. What are some of your challenges that you've met on the field? And did you actually have challenges where you actually saw opportunities within?
So some of the challenges that I come across on the field is specifically because I'm a woman. There's lack of confidence in my ability to do the work. So you find situations whereby you will be second-guessed or questioned on something that you are advising on. And unless there's a man standing next to you, it seems as if whatever you're saying is not valid or there's something missing to it. So those were amongst the biggest challenges, or if you'll be able to do work in extremely remote areas because there's a safety issue now because you're a woman, those are the parameters that now must be looked at. So those are amongst the challenges that I face in the field. And what was your second question? Sorry.
How did you navigate that? Did you find any opportunities within those challenges? Because I think therein also lies that opportunity for you to then stand up and actually say, I've got this wealth of experience. I mean, you studied abroad also.
Correct. So with that, I think my experience abroad also opened my mind, and it kind of showed me a different perspective as to things that are abroad in terms of the infrastructure, how their systems run, and how we do things this side. So with that entail, I came back and I said, you know what, I think I can do this on my own. And it gave me that confidence that I needed to say, I would like to improve the quality of life in Africa. So why not start this thing as a woman and see where it goes?
Gapsi, I'd like to bring you very quickly into this conversation. I mean, we saw recently the floods in KwaZulu-Natal and some parts of the Eastern Cape. A lot of businesses were affected. You're a board member of Umgeni Water. Talk to us about just some of the infrastructural challenges that came as a result of that natural disaster.
Well, yeah, very sad topic, and I still feel very sorry for the families that were affected. Well, infrastructure challenges, it's something you wouldn't believe. So in the infrastructure world, we have, like I'll explain it a bit, we have your bigger infrastructure that we see in terms of dams, and then we have also the big infrastructure we see in terms of treatment plants, it's wastewater treatment plants. Some areas big and visible. We also have pipes in different sizes, small ones and big ones. What happened during this period was that the challenge was to all types of infrastructure. I'm talking dam walls, I'm talking the pipes, even the big ones. We call them aqueducts. They normally a big pipe that will channel water to a certain point. So the impact was in all the systems. Normally, when you have an occurrence, it will be just one pipe. So all the systems were tested. And one of the biggest things that happened was that now was decision making. What do you do now when someone doesn't have water and then you still have to follow a governance process? To me, that was one of the most hurtful things, to say, I can see that people are waiting for water, but now it's like, okay, where is the pipe? Just like the assessment. had to take time because of the nature of the occurrence, you know. And moving from the assessment, the issue of procurement, now where do we get the services, also took time. And every minute there was someone out there who didn't have the water. So that was quite a big challenge. What I like the most about our infrastructure is that if I look at how the impact was in terms of Umgeni water, there was a plan in place. So recovery was very quick. So although it did happen, if you look at the system, we were able to do infrastructure recovery, and we learned from it to say in infrastructure you must always have backup, and you must always ensure that your backup is in a perfect condition. So that's what I learned, and I think moving forward we should really continue investing in infrastructure.
And I mean, one of the things that Itumeleng mentioned was just the human factor with all of these challenges, and I think after the break I want us to discuss who really was affected, you know, be it COVID-19, be the recent floods that we saw in the country, because what you will find is that the poorest of the poor, and especially women and children, are mostly impacted by some of these. But we'll discuss that straight after this short break. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You are through to Imbokodo, a roundtable discussion with various women in South Africa, particularly women in business. Now, we're looking at some of the factors that affect businesses in this country, even global factors for that matter. We are in COVID-19, a pandemic that's been with us for over 2 years now. We also saw recent floods in KZN and parts of the Eastern Cape. We now know that the Ukraine-Russia war is definitely affecting businesses here in South Africa and ordinary citizens. So I've got my panel of guests here with me just to discuss some of the challenges and how we can overcome them. I mean, one of the pivotal things that I want to talk to you ladies about is also over and above the things that I've mentioned in terms that, that are affecting businesses. We also have high numbers of youth employment. I mean, I just want to talk to you about the latest quarterly labor force survey. I'm sure you know them. For the first quarter of 2022, the unemployment rate was 63.9% for those aged between 15 to 24. And I mean, that affects you directly, Ketiwe. And 42.1% for those aged 25 to 34 years old. That affects you, Dimpo. While the current official national rate stands at 34.5%. That is diabolical. And where I can actually say is that women and also poor people are being affected the most.
Yeah, I think that is really amplified because of the structure of business and the economy, right? 51% of this country is female, right? But you'll find that at the top, if we're lucky, maybe at board level, we're sitting at about 10% representation. Yet the client-facing or the public-facing entities like retail, financial services, etc., at the most entry-level layers, you have about 65% representation of women. You walk into your average grocery store, your average bank branch, you're more likely to see a female than a man. Now, during all these disasters that we are facing around the globe, when businesses were shut down or slowed down, who gets impacted? The people at the lowest level of the hierarchy, the females and youth, because they are the least experienced. So you have to start almost at the bottom to work your way up. And that's why you've seen this shift where when businesses had to shut down during lockdown and had to let go of staff or look at how they restructure themselves, the most experienced people that they could not afford to let go were not the females or the young people, right? And hence you find this huge impact of females and young people by this dynamic. And I think we all have a role to play in deliberately going out of our way to say, how do we find ways of remediating that? How do we actually turn it around?
I mean, Gabsi, I want you to step in there, especially when you look at the youth unemployment, and especially when you know that women are also the most affected. What are some of the things that you think in this country we need to do to make those numbers, diminish? I mean, they are at an all-time high.
Well, for me, the question you asked, and I thought food security. What I've learned from the crisis you spoke about is the importance of availability of food. Some of the things that I've looked at is one I would mention is agriculture. You know, during this pandemic, and then I learned to go and look at a pack of seeds, to say, okay, this time around, I'm going to buy the seeds, I'm going to plant, and I'm going to have my vegetables. So I think in agriculture, we can find employment, and the barriers of entry are not so high. So getting a piece of land, I'm not talking about a huge piece of land, so many hectares, just a few square meters, is something that is within reach for many people. And the seeds themselves, some of them we're getting from fruit that we eat, and some from vegetables. I learned through this that we can survive through agriculture, and maybe we should be doing it on a daily basis. And for us as Project 85, we went further to say we're now going to intensify the training on agriculture, because you spoke about it. It's women, it is it's youth, and I've learned now through the crisis you're talking about. One of the projects we have, Project 85, we've managed to get into agriculture. And every morning now we're counting eggs. You know, every morning it's like, how many eggs do we have? That's now commercial. So now through agriculture, we're looking at poultry, which will be your chicken and your ducks. You're looking at livestock, which will be your sheep. And then you're looking at vegetables themselves. And also there's something I learned also during the crisis is nursery, how much money you can make from just having a nursery and selling plants to different types of people. So for me, what has been the highlight has been the role of agriculture, and also how we can ensure that we provide our own food and ensure there's food security.
I think that's very important.
One very important thing is that business need to, especially big businesses, needs to put people before profits in times like these. You know, you have to, even if you don't receive an income, I have a phenomenal team, and that was my most important thing, that even if there's no income and the country shut down for 2 months, make sure that you look after those people who are the people that look after you through the good times. And that's very, very important.
I want to bring Dimpo and Ketiwe in, because you are young South African women who've started businesses in a very rough patch, I think, in our times. You know, what are some of the things that you can offer as an advice? I mean, even if it's a hard pill to swallow, in terms of those that are thinking of starting businesses, particularly if you look at what you studied and you are exactly doing what you studied and the lessons that you've, you know, accumulated when you were abroad in Portugal and so forth. But what is some of the advice you can give, you know, the youth, particularly if you look at these numbers that are so high in terms of unemployment?
I think for starters, get a mentor. Get somebody that you can speak to about all the challenges that you're facing, about what lies ahead, your expectations, what they think about it. Or if not that, for example, there is a mentorship academy that I have joined. We are 10 mentors. Mentees, I mean, and then there are mentors as well. We are linked with these mentors, and they are people that are well established in business, successful in their respected environments, and they basically assist us and help guide where we're trying to go. So the first for me is get a mentor, get somebody who will be there for you when it comes to the business part of it, when it comes to the mental part of it, and I think secondly, be resilient. Be resilient, because as much as I think before there was a brick wall in terms of progressing, but now it's more of a red tape, and a red tape is easier to cross than a brick wall. So just be resilient and try and push. If you're passionate about it, you will find a way.
And Ketiwe, just on that, you know, they say fail and, you know, eventually you'll get it right. So how are you doing? I mean, and also, you know, having answered that, what is the advice that you can say, particularly listening to what Dimpo is saying in terms of be resilient?
I really love what you said, especially about passion, because for me, I'm running a business and a nonprofit that has nothing to do with my expertise, what I'm studying for, which is to be an accountant. As much as those skills are very relevant in any business, they're really needed. But because I have those two different, I would say, streams of things that I need to do in my life, I speak so often about being being intentional about your career and career mapping. Often I hear people who are unemployed. I mean, I'm also in the space where I'm currently looking for a job, and it's like, where are you applying? And people will say everywhere. What do you mean you're applying everywhere? That means you're not intentional about what exactly it is we're going to do and where you see your value, where your value will be cherished, and where you will see yourself growing. So I really speak to young people through the programs we do in Ketty's Foundation to say that have your career objectives and be very clear about them. And then from there, go and volunteer in the spaces where you want to see yourself. Make sure that people know you before they see you on an interview list. They must know who you are, what you do, and how well you do it, because the job market is very tight right now. It's not very easy to get a job. I'm experiencing it myself. But by the time I get to the jobs I want to do, so many people would have already heard my name.
Melang, I'd like you to just touch a little bit on what Udimpo was saying about, just the barriers to entry that are very difficult. But let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll discuss about, why is it difficult? What are companies doing to help especially young people get into, the various fields that they want to go into. But let's take a quick break. We'll be back straight after this. Don't go away. Welcome back. While we are having a discussion, a roundtable discussion this Women's Month with women in business. And one of the most important things that we are currently discussing is the barriers to entry. And a company that we recently interviewed, in fact, said the barriers to entry are high, but the existence to entry are just as high. And in fact, that's where I'd like us to pick up, Itumeleng. As the CEO of the JSE, you are probably faced with so many of these companies yourself, and I know that you also are helping those startup companies as well as an entity. Talk to us about why is it so hard to, firstly, as a woman, a business-owned company, why is it hard for you to enter into those spaces? And again, why is it hard to even stay within that business organization and make it stay afloat as much as possible and as long as possible?
I think that the two dynamics first, Unathi. There's the dynamic of the space you're trying to get into, right? And as Ketchwe mentioned earlier on, intentionality is everything. The organizations that are very deliberate and intentional about an outcome of inclusivity, you will find are much easier to engage with, to work with, than those that kind of say on the front of it that diversity is important, but then give you excuses the minute you need to see it, right? So they'll be, oh, it's so hard to find a qualified female, or we've looked, we can't find them, right? Then how come is it that those organizations that are intentional never had that as a problem? The JSE has over 76% of our executive committee as females. Our board is over 56% female, right? And we deliberately go out and say, there are females out there and we will find them. And even when I was working in industries that weren't very high penetration from a female perspective, we went out of our way to create a pipeline. Go find young talented people and educate them so that in 5 years' time you don't have the same problem, right? You can't leave it and say, I have a problem, someone else must solve it. So it's that dynamic of what do you contribute towards the solution, whether it be going to grassroots level at high school level or at tertiary education level and contributing to the outcome that you want. We have to plant seeds now to reap the rewards as an industry in 10 years time or so. The other thing though I have observed as just being in financial services that in the worst economic crises over history, there were always entities, small, medium, large, that would still outshine, still perform, still remain competitive. And we went and said, what is the common denominator amongst all of those companies? And it's because the owners or the leaders of those businesses don't listen to the noise. They don't listen to the hype. You know, economic numbers coming out, unemployment numbers. These people are pounding the streets looking for the opportunity to solve a problem that's existing in society. Yeah, in fact, Gapsi, not only do you sit on boards, but you also manage to run your own businesses. Why is it so hard to keep
going in those businesses? I mean, I can tell you one of the reasons. I mean, you were probably running a business, but then COVID hits and then load shedding, you know, and all of these problems come. How can people stay afloat when all of this is happening? And as Itumeleng said, cancel the noise.
It's important to keep your overheads very low. You know, it's very important. And also re-skilling and re-engineering your business. As things change, you must also change. So there are different ways you can change. You can change to normal knowledge management. You can go through and read about things. You can try and get to be more skilled. You can also say, okay, you know what, I'm going to get educated. If there's something new about governance, I will go to that course and understand it much better. So it helps, because then I don't see ever business, I don't see it stop being dynamic, and I don't see a world where everything will be constant. In the years I've been in business, there's been changes almost yearly, some very big, some very small, but my advice will be keep on changing yourself and your organization, so that then you always adapt to the new changes. If you don't do that, the chances are along the way you might not make it. So for me, change is very important.
I want us to talk about the secret. What is the secret to, you know, to keep on going? But before we do that, Haley, I'd like you to also just, you know, piggyback on what Okapsi was saying, particularly in terms of upskilling and reskilling. I mean, your environment that you're in, it really needs technical know-how, but you've managed to come into that space. How important is it for someone, you know, who wants to get into a particular space to ensure that they have the right skills?
It's about attitude. It's about applying yourself and having the will to do it. It's about knowing that if you do what is right, if you follow process, if you apply yourself and you give it your all, that you can make it. You can definitely do it, but you do need to have that tenacity, that will to want to stay there and give it your all. On the production line, it's really not an easy task. You have to be there at 6 o'clock, and that line starts with or without you. So you have to have a contingency plan in place if the taxi is late. You need to want to be there, and you will be there. And like I say, I have the most amazing team. It's about leadership and being there with the team, not saying is everybody there. It's about showing up, about doing what you're supposed to.
One of the conversations that I had, you know, some of the women were saying women supporting women is such a beautiful thing to have, because you can then stay the course. You can then be resilient. How important is it for you? I mean, as we now start to, you know, speak about life-work balance, you know, is it real? Is it not? How important is it for you, if you want to stay focused in doing what you're doing, is that support structure for you, Dimpo?
That support structure is very important for me, because where previously you would find resistance, if I would say, previously I wanted to start a business, I was speaking to my sister, I was speaking to an aunt, to a lady at church, and it's the engineering route, they would out straight say to me, don't do it. That's it's a men's field, it's a boys club. You're not going to make it.
Boys club.
You're not going to make it.
Yeah.
If not that, people would want certain things from you that may stand against your moral code, sexual advances and so forth. So that would be the first thing that they would tell me and say, don't do it. So now there's a shift. There's a shift in society and the mindset of the women that are my support structure to say, you can do it. You know what? We believe in you. And to prove that, one of my first clients actually, she headhunted me just because I was a woman. She said, look, it's a residential building. She said, I've been renovating this house of mine for a while, and I've been using male companies. What I want to do now is give you an opportunity just because you're a woman, and let's see what you can do. So I think once we can get the society to have that mindset, give people an opportunity based on what they can do and what they're capable of instead of their gender, we can go far.
Isn't that interesting? Sorry, go ahead.
It is very interesting that you say that, because there's this concept that I really love that talks about lift as you rise. So it's not about that you will eventually get to the top floor and then start lifting. It's about lifting now. As hard as it is for me now with all the struggles I face in my businesses, I'm very intentional about not really, I wouldn't call it mentoring, but making sure that there's people who are younger than me, who are witnessing my journey and who are knowing that it's possible from the grassroots level. And I've spoken so much on this to say that we are living a legacy of selflessness, not planning on leaving it behind. What are you doing to build from the very bottom? And even though you feel that you haven't made it to that point, but you can ensure that you are raising someone with you. Yeah.
And Gapsi, just on that point, lift as you rise. I mean, there's this misconception out there, I'm not even sure if it's true or not, but where the older and more successful you are, especially as a black woman, you tend to forget the ones that follow you, you know. So how true is that? And how important then does it become for older generation to mentor the young up-and-coming generation?
Well, in my case, it's not true at all. I mentor, it's not true at all. And but in some cases, it can be true. But you're asking about importance is very important because people need to know how it is. Is business hard? Yes, it's very hard. Is it enjoyable? Yes, it's enjoyable.
I'm going to leave it right there. Is it hard? Yes, it's hard. Is it enjoyable? Yes, it's enjoyable. You've been a great panel. Thank you so much for joining us. Our time is unfortunately up. Thank you so much for watching at home. From me, Unathi Batyashe, that's a wrap.